now joined by Chris Graham of the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online, here to talk a little high school football perhaps, and of course college basketball as well. Really quick, we'll start with high school football. Another championship for the Riverheads Gladiators in Division I of Group A, as they won a wild one this past Saturday, knocking off Eastern Montgomery in the state championship game 63-49. And Riverheads just continues to amaze folks. That for a program that was down in the 80s and into the 90s, the past decade has been amazing, Chris, for the Riverheads Gladiators.
Yeah, 3 state championships in the last 10 or 11 years. And, you know, we've talked about this on this show the last few weeks as we previewed their playoff run. And the one comment I would make consistently as we talked about Riverheads football is that they put so much pressure on opposing offenses. Now, we know they put pressure on defenses because, of course, they scored 63 in the state title game. But as much pressure as they put on the defense, they put on the offenses, because those opposing offenses know, gosh, those guys can score literally every time they have the ball. So we need to score every time we have the ball. Well, that was case in point in that game with Eastern Montgomery. I mean, 63-49. You score 49 points, and Eastern Montgomery's quarterback threw for over 400 yards and I think 5 touchdowns in that game. And yet they are 2 touchdowns behind because Riverheads is so efficient on offense. If they get rolling, you can't stop them, and that was the case there. And so as a result, we see another Riverhead State Championship. Maybe not the way, Bob Casto, he loves scoring the points. He also likes seeing a little bit more out of his defense, but, you order it up. If you have to win the game that way, win it 63-49. And so Riverheads gets a state championship in a way that, that there are going to be state championship basketball games played in March that won't have that much scoring in them. So give credit to Riverheads for being able to do what they say they can do, which is move the ball up and down the field.
I'm not sure what do you credit most, the coach, the system, the players, even the fans, because Riverheads has some great fans.
Well, I'd say, it's really a little bit of everything. Bob Casto has created a program there and a community there. You go down to the Greenville area and you see people at a football season wearing their red pride shirts. They're so prideful of that program, and because he's been there for a long time, the Little League program feeding all the way through middle school into the JV program, into the varsity program, those kids run that system for 8 or 9 years, and they're honed in it by the time they get to the varsity level, and they want to play Riverheads football. I mean, he's really created an atmosphere there where, as long as he's there and they're running that system, they're going to win football games. And the system then you give credit to as well, because it's a very simple system. He as he likes to point out, he doesn't create stars and all the guys who get the carries and the quarterbacks who maybe throw for some of the yards and receivers who catch them. They're the stars who get their names in the paper, but the offensive line and the way they do their job is what creates all that activity. And so it's a system that works. It's a community that works. It's a program that works, and it all starts at the top. And he's built something, as you pointed out, out of nothing. I mean, Riverheads was a team in the 80s and into the mid-90s maybe that they were a homecoming opponent for everybody. I mean, I've been in this area for a long time, and that was the case. And now
that's pretty much the same way for Buffalo Gap too. They were pretty bad in the 90s as well, and they turned it around in pretty much the same time period as Riverheads. Just haven't turned it around in quite as much as Riverheads has as far as winning state titles.
Well, I guess they had that run in the last couple of years. I think the one difference would be that Riverheads is probably a program that Buffalo Gap had a down year this year, for example. Riverheads has a down year. They may only win 7 or 8 games. So that's the difference there, is that Bob Casto's program has not had consistent down years, or even down years that anybody else will call a down year. His down year is that they only go to the playoffs and maybe lose the first or second game. So he's really got something going there in that sense. And Gap and other programs can run for it. I think the only equivalent in our area maybe would be Lee basketball. And of course, Paul Hatcher's been there for a lot longer time than Bob Casto's been at Riverheads in football. But it's a similar setup for me. It seems that with Paul Hatcher, his kids are playing that system starting in 4th or 5th grade in the little leagues, and they work all the way up through middle school and JV. And kids grow up wanting to play. If you grow up in Stanton, you grow up wanting to play for Paul Hatcher. And I think that Casto has created the same thing out in the Greenville area again. So those are, to me, the 2 equivalents here in our region as far as very mega successful programs.
Yeah, and really quick, Chris, I'll tell you, you look at 2011, some big changes in store for high school football in this part of the state. Rockbridge is switching out of the SPD to the Blue Ridge, and of course there will be no Southern Valley District in 2011. A lot of teams from the Augusta County area will be rejoining the old Valley District, and some of those teams from the Augusta County area, I guess like Wilson, maybe Stewart's Draft, will be heading back to the singular ranks.
Well, yeah, I know Wilson will be, and that's an interesting turn for next year for Riverheads as well. Wilson, of course, was very competitive. We're a quarter away from that last Southern Valley title. They had Lee down big in the fourth quarter, and Lee came back and won and got the playoff bid, and Wilson was left on the outside looking in. So Wilson, of course, was very competitive with Riverheads this year. I think the final score of that game was 13-7. And considering we just talked about a state title game that went 63-49, that tells you that that could be an interesting turn for next year. Wilson coming back to the fold. They were 8-2, playing 4-1 in the Southern Valley, so that'll be an interesting turn. And Stewart's Draft was a playoff team in 2A, and if they go back to 1A, then that would be interesting too. And so that would make the 1A situation in the area here more competitive. And certainly, the reformation for the most part for our teams up this neck of the woods into the old Valley District will be very interesting. That district I used to call it was like the Big Ten of Virginia. You'd have 3 or 4 playoff teams out of that group some years, and it may be like the CAA now. The CAA in 1AA football, that there's going to be a state championship contender in that district. You just don't know who it is when they start. So that will be interesting next year to see how the old battle lines will reform, and we'll see how it all plays out.
Hey Chris, before we wrap things up, I was talking about some college basketball. How about pro football? The Washington Redskins had a chance to send that game against Tampa Bay to overtime Sunday. Flopped the extra point. How disappointing has this season been for the Redskins in your mind?
I think very disappointing. I wrote a column on VA Sports Online this week about the Mike Shanahan year. I mean, I think fans expected a lot more than they got out of Mike Shanahan, and to some degree they've had some injury issues. They're down to running backs that probably weren't even in camp when they started, or wouldn't have been in too many people's camps except as training camp fodder. You got a wide receiver who's starting for you regularly. I think it's Anthony Armstrong, who was a Arena League guy. So you brought Donovan McNabb and you brought Mike Shanahan in, and you didn't have a lot of talent around them. It's frustrating though. They've found new ways to lose games. I mean, the other day, not only the extra point at the end that botched that that everybody sees and remembers, but what you don't remember is they dominated that first half. I mean, I think Ryan Terrain had close to 200 yards rushing. But they couldn't punch it in the red zone. They missed a chippy field goal. They're only up 10-3 at halftime in a game they utterly dominated. That's the key to that one. If they convert their points, convert their drives in the first half, maybe the game's already out of reach by halftime. And so they've done the little things wrong. They've done some big things wrong. Obviously missing an extra point or not even getting an extra point attempt at the end of the game to tie the game and send it to overtime. It's been a disappointing year. Mike Shanahan's had some highly publicized run-ins with his star players. Albert Haynesworth suspended for the rest of the season. Didn't really contribute much as the season went on. He benched Donovan McNabb in a 2-minute drill against Detroit. He had him taking half the snaps on Friday last week. So he's playing mind games with his star quarterback. I mean, everything's gone wrong that could go wrong. They're 5-8. It's just been a disappointing season, and so you want to hope that things can get better next year. But the first thing they got to do is get more players in there, and then see if Mike Shanahan can coach them up.
Okay, Chris, and finally, college basketball. Not too many big games of late, but we're gearing up for the ACC run in January and February.
Yeah, well, Virginia, I know, comes back with Oregon after their exam break. Virginia Tech, a big win over Penn State this past weekend. So Tech, I guess, playing through their exam break and getting a win over a Big Ten school. And Virginia comes back with a Pac-10 game. I mean, they didn't look too good in their win over Radford, to say the least, going into their exam break. And this Cavs team is surprising people with a 6-3 record. I think a lot of people looked at their early season schedule and thought maybe 3-6 would have been a possibility. They could have played good and been 3-6. The Hokies are at 5-4. But, I'm willing to give Seth Greenberg the leeway that he's had in past years. Now, last year they started off pretty hot because they played a weak non-conference schedule. But Seth has had teams in the past that have played 500 ball in November and December who've played really good in January and February and into March. And so I think that, we'll give him that leeway until, we'll see how this team starts playing in January. But that's a senior-laden team, a veteran-laden team. And so I look for both those teams to be competitive in the ACC. Of course, it also helps that the ACC's down a bit this year. But I think our local teams, Virginia Tech, can be in that mix, potentially for NCAA bids, NIT bids. We'll see how they do in the ACC. But I think they can be there, barring injury and anything else unforeseen.
Okay, Chris, any final thoughts? Anything else we look for in the coming days from either the Augusta Free Press or Virginia Sports Online?
Well, I'll be on a conference call with Tony Bennett tomorrow. He'll be talking about that Oregon game coming up on Friday, how his team has fared through the exam break. And so we'll be getting into that. Then I'll be at the game on Friday night. I think that's an 8 o'clock tip. It's on TV, and we'll be live blogging during the game. So if the fans or people are listening here at home, if they're watching the game on TV, they can join me on the live blog. I'll give them a feel for what it's like inside JPJ and some of my thoughts and observations. And then we'll maybe start turning our attention a little bit more back to the Orange Bowl, Virginia Tech and Stanford. Maybe we talk about that more in the next couple of weeks as we get a feel for that game. So we've got some college basketball keeping our attention, and we'll turn our attention back to college football.
Sounds great. Chris Green with the Augusta Free Press and Virginia Sports Online. And we're going to connect more online again here on this Tuesday on Classic Country, AM 1450, right after this.